Hello, this is my Lab 2 Lines of Charge video. This presentation will be split into 5 sections: an introduction, observations, calculations, a model, and finally the conclusion. So in this experiment, we were asked to build upon Lab 1 and investigate the concept of charges and electric fields with the phenomena of a floating tape, which is a tape that seemed to be floating above another tape due to an electric force. Uh, However, in this lab, we model tapes as charged lines instead of point charges as we did in Lab 1. The fundamental physical principles involved were the electric field and the electric force, the force of gravitation, the law of superposition, and the conservation of charge. The results are shown here, and I've separated them in terms of the model, the results generated from the model in glow script, and then the results from the integration of the analytical calculation. Now for observations. So like Lab 1, I measured the length and mass of tapes A and B, the width of the tapes, and the distance between the tapes. Also, I found that when two charged U-tapes were held close together, they were repelled, and this told me that the charge of the U-tapes have the same sign. Also, both my hand and the negatively charged pen attracted the U-tapes, and the latter told me that the U-tapes are positively charged. And finally, when the base tape was brought close to the other tape, it began floating. So now for calculations, and we know that in these calculations, we assume that tape A is a line of charge and tape B is a point charge in order to make the integration easier. So first, we develop a expression for delta E, which is the electric field contribution of a single piece of tape A, some delta Q, and then we can make some substitutions shown here based on the diagram that we have. And also we can calculate delta E sub y, which is the y direction of the electric field, as the x direction of the x component of the electric field is 0. We then can convert into differentials and then integrate over all x, which is essentially integrating over the length of tape A. We can then substitute in values that we observed, so y0 and L. And finally, we can calculate the force of gravity, and then we can calculate or solve for the value of Q, as the net force on tape B is 0, which means that the force of gravity is equal to -1 times the electric force in the y direction. And we find that Q is equal to 1.72 times 10 to the -8 coulombs. Then we can calculate the number of deficient electrons, as we did in Lab 1, which is simply equal to the number of excess protons. And then we can calculate the surface area and in turn use a conversion factor to calculate the number of surface atoms. And then using these two numbers, we can calculate that the ratio of deficient electrons to surface atoms is 2.77 times 10 to the -7. Next, we have our model, and the assumptions that we use here are ignoring air resistance on the moving tapes. And also, unlike the analytical calculation, we assume that each U-tape has the same amount of charge evenly distributed along the length of the tape, so they are lines of charge. So this function shown here represents the tapes on the screen and splits them up into in this case 20 deltas sub q's or portions of charge. This function sums up the electric field and force contributions for each delta q on each particle of the top tape. And these net electric fields can be seen by the green arrows. And the white arrow is the net electric force on the top tape, and the yellow arrow is the net gravitational force. And we find that the charge is 1.81 times 10 to the -8 coulombs, which we find is very similar to the 1.72 times 10 to the -8 coulombs we found through the analytical integration. So in conclusion, we see that the point charge model produces a lower charge than the line model. And this is because in the line model, the charge is distributed across the length of the tape. So that means that each delta Q produces an electric field with some X component, which causes the top tape to be stretched apart. And this causes the sort of hump characteristic as shown here. However, in the point charge model, the point charge produces an electric field that only has a y component. That means all of the electric force is concentrated in the y direction. This means that no charge is being used to stretch apart the tape. And thus the line model is more accurate because it matches observations and also avoids the assumption of the tapes being point charges. Thank you.